How would you prepare yourself and your company for the Battle of Long Tan? Welcome to episode 54 of the Principles of War podcast, Preparing for the Battle of Long Tan with Lieutenant Colonel Harry Smith.
This is the Principles of War podcast, professional military education for junior officers and senior NCOs.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm very honoured to have as a guest Lieutenant Colonel Harry Smith, a man who really needs no introduction. He was the OC of Delta Company 6RAR at the Battle of Long Tan. For me, the more I've read about the Battle of Long Tan, the more I've come to understand just how important the training program was prior to going to Vietnam and the building of esprit de corps within Delta Company to enable the soldiers to perform at the level at what they did. Which is why it's such a great honour to have the opportunity to talk to Harry about the way that he trained and prepared Delta for their deployment to Vietnam. This interview, which we'll do over 3 or 4 episodes, obviously dovetails very nicely with the interview that we did with Dave Sabin, the platoon commander of 12th Platoon at the Battle of Long Tan. In this interview, we're also going to get some great insights into what it was like to actually fight the company during the battle as they transitioned from an encounter battle through to being entirely defensive out in the Long Tan rubber plantation. And we're also going to get some really interesting insights into what it was like working with the CO of 6RAR, Lieutenant Colonel Townsend, and the Task Force Commander, Brigadier Jackson. In January this year, I was lucky enough to actually go to the battlefield at Long Tan. I was able to visit the cross. I also spent a little bit of time at Nui Dat. One of the key insights I picked up from Nui Dat was from standing on the slope of SAS Hill, you can actually see Nui Dat 2, which is the prominent landmark right next to the battlefield. I was also able to significantly confuse our guide, who spoke no English, as we were driving between Nui Dat through to Long Tan. We took a few little diversions and I managed to find the creek crossing, the crossing in the Soidabang Creek, where Lieutenant Adrian Roberts crossed in the M113s as he was delivering Alpha Company to the battlefield. I've got some great drone footage of both Nui Dat and the battlefield, so I'll be putting them up on our YouTube channel at some stage, so keep an eye out for them. Now, without any further ado, let's get into our interview with Lieutenant Colonel Harry Smith. Morning, sir. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Just for the listeners, do you want to give us a little bit of your background prior to Vietnam?
Yes, I was age 33 in Vietnam at the Battle of Long Tan, which is fairly young for a company commander, I suppose, but of course I was the oldest bugger in the company as far as the soldiers are concerned. Most of them were aged, 19 to 21. I had some 64 national servicemen in my company. 11 of those national servicemen were killed in the battle. But prior to that, I'd been a national serviceman myself. In fact, I had 5 years in school cadets, which I enjoyed. We used to fire the Vickers machine guns on the Fontville rifle range, and it was wonderful firing belt after belt through those wonderful old guns. And then when I left high school in Hobart, I went to work at a place called Austral Bronze, which were manufacturers of copper sheeting and brass sheeting and so forth. And then I got called in the National Service in January 1952, the original National Service scheme, which was, 3 months full-time and X number of days part-time. I forget the numbers, 176 or something. But at the end of my National Service, I said to my father, I want to stay in the Army. And he said, you can do better than that. And I said, well, I don't know about that. I said, I love the Army. So I joined up at Anglesey Barracks at Hobart as a private soldier in the regular Army and went out to Brighton Camp where I'd been with the cadets in National Service. And I was promoted to temporary corporal as a section instructor training national servicemen. Then my father said, well, son, if you're going to stay in the army, why don't you go to the new officer cadet school at Portsea, which had just opened in 1952. And so I applied, and I was duly selected and went up to Launceston, over Bass Strait by ship, and finished up down at Portsea for 6 months and got the one pit lieutenant, second lieutenant, which is the lowest form of animal in the army in those days, according to most of the country officers. But I then went back up to the School of Infantry at Seymour and did 3 months infantry corps training. Then I was asked where I wanted to go to serve, and I said, well, I'd like to go to Armoured Corps and follow in my father's footsteps. He was a sergeant in the Armoured Corps in World War II. So, okay. And when I went and looked at the notice board, I was posted to infantry and posted back to Tasmania. So I finished up going back to Brighton Camp for almost 3 years as a platoon commander, training platoon after platoon national servicemen.
How did you find that? What was that sort of experience like?
I enjoyed it. You know, you got a bunch of civilians. In 3 months, you turned them into soldiers. And, I found that was quite challenging and quite pleasing to see the results after 3 months. But then came the time to move on from there, and I was posted from Brighton Camp to the School of Infantry in Seymour. I detract that to have to erase this proof. I was then posted to 2LAR in Malaya. I was flown across to Malaya and joined a 2nd Battalion as a platoon commander in Charlie Company and served in Malaya for 2 years, came back to Australia and served as the machine gun platoon commander of 2 Battalion at Holsworthy, promoted to captain. That was a very interesting command. I had 4 Austin Champs and Jeeps, which weren't very good vehicles, but that's what we had at the time, and trailers and 6 machine guns, 2 to a trailer. We were a self-contained little unit, a very autonomous command, and, I'd be given a role to go and fire machine guns here or there or somewhere, and whenever we did exercises. I quite enjoyed that. And I was with 2 Battalion until I was then posted to the School of Infantry at Seymour as a machine gun instructor. And the day I arrived at Seymour, the CO said to me, hey, bad luck, Smith, he said, the Vickers machine gun has been dropped from the Army's Register of Weapons and it's been replaced by the M60, which wasn't a medium machine gun as such, on a tripod. So he said, you're now going to be a mortar instructor, 3-inch mortar. So I then became a student on a mortar course under Kevin Pitt Newman. He was a Tasmanian and sadly died of a heart attack not too long after he left the army at an early age. So then I became the School of Infantry's mortar officer instructor and moved with them up to Ingleburn to the infantry centre. Stayed there for some time, and then I was posted. I was asked where I wanted to go. Jerry O'Day, Lieutenant Colonel, was the chief instructor, and they said, the directorate want to move you on, time to go. Where do you want to go? Pacific Island Regiment in New Guinea or Commandos in Melbourne? Well, I'd had parachute wings when I was with, anyway, the 1st Battalion I served with the CO sent me off to get my parachute wings, 1954, and I got my wings, and so I said, well, I'll go to 2 Commando Company, thanks very much. So there I go, down to Ripponlea near Caulfield High School in Melbourne, and served with 2 Commando Company, which was a very interesting and enjoyable posting.
How long were you with 2 Commando for?
Almost 3 years, let's say 2.5 years. It was a very interesting posting. I was actually adjutant quartermaster and training officer, but most times the commanding officer or officer commanding was away or not there or not posted. So most of that time I was the boss, and I was able to dictate what we did and where we went. And, it was good from the point of view that we were amphibious, airborne, all the wonderful things of being in Special Forces. It wasn't easy. I must say I had to qualify from the Green Beret, and, that part of it comprised running with a full pack for something like 10 miles in those days, 15 kilometres, I suppose, boot skaters and a heavy pack. And I was bloody fit in those days. But anyway, I survived and got my Green Beret and held it for the rest of my army tour, except we weren't allowed to wear it in infantry battalions. But we had small boats, and we could organise an aeroplane to come down to Point Cook and go and parachute. Very autonomous, and we were very much supported by Army headquarters in those days. If I wanted to get an aeroplane down from wherever to do a parachute jump with the commandos, 9 times out of 10 I'd go. And sadly, it affected my private family life because working, 5 days a week, and then most weekends on courses we used to run at the depot at Ripponlea, upset my family life, and I was told, get out of the army and be a normal father. I had 2 young children, and I said, well, what am I going to do? I don't have a trade, so I said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to leave the army. So that became the end of my first marriage, and I lived in army barracks at Ripponlea then most of the time until I was moved on to another unit, which was, from memory, up to the infantry centre at Ingleburn as an instructor and adjutant. Yeah, very enjoyable. After the infantry centre, let me think, where did I go then?
Did you deploy at all?
Deploy?
Yeah.
No, we didn't deploy there. No, in those days it was simply a CMF unit. It wasn't like the commandos these days that are part of the commando regiment and went to Afghanistan, for example. It was all peacetime training.
What did you learn about the training program that you put to? Or do you want to describe a little bit about the training program that you put together?
It was fairly stereotyped year after year. You had a number of training systems to get the recruits trained, comprised a lot of physical exercise. We had canoes. We would do amphibious exercise courses. We used to dive, and I became a shallow water diver, having qualified. And then I became a diving supervising instructor, which gave me the ability to run overseas courses. And we did most of our recruit diving down at where the old Navy ship is down from Melbourne. Name escapes me. But that's where we did most of our diving. But from time to time we go around to places like Hastings and other side of Mornington Peninsula or wherever. And diving was very pleasant. I enjoyed it. Then, of course, there was climbing. And we'd go up to the Grampians and do climbing exercise, abseiling down cliffs, roping, normal weapons training and so forth. But most of the good things in commandos were to do with the water as far as I was concerned.
Fitness was a big part of the training program, was it?
Yes, it was. We kept ourselves very fit. We had all sorts of fitness aids in the training hangar at the Commando Depot at Ripponlea, and roping and other things in the hall. And, you could wear yourself out very quickly in a couple of hours inside the drill hall and all the various aids.
So what was your next posting?
I went to 6th Battalion in Brisbane, and I was promoted to Major Company Commander, and I arrived in 6th Battalion at Enoggera just after it had been formed in June 1965. I arrived there in July and became a company commander, and we accepted our first lot of National Service recruits before Christmas. I had a couple of National Service officers that came from Skyville, Dave Sabin and Gordon Sharp. Sadly, Gordon Sharp was killed in the battle. Dave Sabin was a very, very good officer, a very intelligent man who spoke on the podcast the other day, and he was a good platoon commander. I had another platoon commander, Jeff Kendall, regular Army. Gordon Sharp, he was sadly killed earlier in the battle.
What are your thoughts on the Skyville program? So obviously it was quite an accelerated officer training program. What did you think? So you had two of the products?
Oh, look, I was a OCS officer, so, I came up the quick way. I certainly didn't do the 4 years from Duntroon. Officer cadet school from Portsea weren't very highly regarded by our elite Duntroon officers. Skyville was the shorter version of OCS, but they were, I thought, well trained as platoon commanders. Well, to become platoon commanders. I don't have any problems with Skyville officers. Gordon Sharp was not probably as strong as I would have liked, but sadly he got killed in a battle. And, he was brave, and it's the reason he got killed. He called an artillery fire, and he knelt up to see where the rounds were landing to the front of his platoon, and he was told to get down by his platoon sergeant, Bob Buick. And before he got down, he was shot and killed, and that was the end of Gordon Sharp. Dave Sabin served on with me for the whole tour, as did Jeff Kendall. Yeah, I'm happy with my officers.
We'll leave the interview with Harry there for the moment, but already I think would agree that there's some really great insights into the man and what it was that was driving things like his training program and his philosophy around combat, which were significant factors in the success of Long Tan. The next episode, we're going to look at the move to Vietnam, Vung Tau, what it was like at Nui Dat before the battle, and some of the preparation going into the defensive position.
The Principles of War podcast is brought to you by James Ealing. The show notes for the Principles of War podcast are available at www.theprinciplesofwar.com for maps, photos and other information that didn't make it into the podcast. Follow us on Facebook or tweet us at Surprise Podcast. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review on iTunes and tag a mate in on one of our episodes. All opinions expressed by individuals are those of those individuals and not of any organisation.